Welcome back to the Kaiju tutorial series. Today we'll continue the simple inventory tutorial series. In the last video we had looked at creating the base for the project. We also looked at available to payout and today's revenue. In today's video we'll be continuing and we'll this time look at today's sessions and followers. We'll keep the videos between 10 to 15 minutes as we do this project in bites. So this video will do today's session and followers, the next one charts, then new orders, etc. We'll only keep the videos long if we're doing something that is complicated, like some complicated logic, etc. Please like and subscribe. Please join me as we continue this series. Thank you. Okay, so let's get started. So if you look here, you'll see that we're going to be doing two similar cards, similar to the about, the available to payout, and the today's revenue. So what we're going to do now, we're going to create the skeleton for the today's session, and we may borrow some elements from the previous cards. Okay. So this section, we're going to call it today's. So what we're going to do, we're going to create inside of extension a subview just to break up the project a little bit. Okay, so it will be today sessions report summary card. So we'll copy this and we'll find some space within the extension and we'll create a section called private var so that it's only usable inside of this particular view. It's of some view. Okay, so what we'll do now, we'll place it inside of a VStack and we'll say alignment of leading, because by default a VStack uses a center alignment. Then we're going to go ahead and create a HStack because because the card is a combination of V and HStack, the content will be horizontally laid out while some parts inside of the card will be vertical. Okay, so the next we're going to need another VStack, and this time we're going to say alignment of leading again, but this time we're going to add a little bit of spacing, and in this case we're going to say a spacing of 10. Then what we're going to do now, we're going to need a section, add a little space, going to need in an HStack, and this HStack is going to have the summary title. So we'll say text, then we'll need to call the view model. So what we're going to do, I'm going to add just a dummy string here. There's a placeholder string here, and then I will add the value. So I'll just put in that spot title. Then what we're going to do, we're going to say this is going to be a font of caption, a foreground color of color.primary. Beautiful thing about using primary and secondary is that it adopts whether it's dark mode or not. Then we're going to give it a line limit of 1, and we're going to add a minimum scaling factor of 0.6, so basically 60%, so that depending on the user's screen it's able to adjust and based on the type of font that they have associated. Next, inside of this VStack, we're going to need a trend button. So in the previous episode, we had gone through and created a trend button. So we're going to need a trend %. I'm going to create a constant. I'm just going to add a default value in the interim. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to go up and I'm just going to create the view model. Check to ensure we have the view model needed for the today's session. So when I scroll to the top, I'll go inside of the sales view model, and we'll see that we'll need a next one that will have the details and the data necessary for today's session. Okay, so we'll need a publisher. So publish var today's session. Today's session. Then we're going to use a data model that we had created, summary data model, which we had created in a previous video. And what we're going to need inside here, we're going to need a summary amount, title, subheadline, headline value, and percent change. Okay, so inside of the title, we're going to say today's sessions. In the future, we're going to actually let this pull from a database, but for now we're using dummy values to get the interface done. Then we'll iterate. Okay, in the subheadline field, we will say visitors. Oh, this should be inside of a string. So visitors. The amount that we'll be using is 1,456. Then the line value. For line value, we'll say 500. And for the percent change, we'll say -3.2. Okay, so now that we have today's session, we'll go back to the dashboard and let's call the view model. So replace the title and say sales VM dot today's session, and we're going to say title, summary title. Okay, then we're going to replace the dummy value inside of trend bubble view, and we'll say sales VM today's session, and we're going to say percent change. Good. Okay, so now what we have to do next, let's look back for reference. We have created a top section here. We'll now need to create this section that is going to show the overall value in terms of the amount of visitors, as well as the sub headline section. Okay, so let's continue. So let me take out a little space. So we're going to need another H-stack. Well, we don't need an H-stack for this one. We'll just need another text, and inside this text is where we're going to have the summary amount. So we're going to call sales VM dot today's session dot summary amount. This one will be of font title. So we want it to be large. We also want it to be a primary foreground color. So color dot primary. We also want this one to be bold because we want it to be highlighted. So if you notice right here, we have a lot of decimal places, but we don't want any decimal places in this regard. So we'll specify a specifier. We'll create a specifier. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see the screen a little bit better. So we'll say comma specifier, and to get, we'll say that we want no decimal places. So %sign 0.0f, so no decimal point. Perfect. Next, what we'll need, we will need another H-stack at the bottom. So this one will be at the bottom of the stack. So the H-stack, and we'll give this one a spacing of 1. Then inside here, we're going to need two things. We're going to need the sub headline value and the sub headline. Sub headline value will come in front, which will say 500. So need a text. And then we're going to say sales VM dot today's session, then subheadline value. We want this to be bolded. Then below that, well, beside that, we're going to need another text. And what we'll need is a sales VM dot today's session dot summer headline. Okay, so we'll like to create a font. So instead of individual, I put in a font on each T text. What we'll do, we'll just add it on the parent, which will be the H-stack to apply the styling to both or all child components. So right here, we're going to say font, and we're going to use a font of caption. Then we'll use a foreground color of primary. Perfect. Okay, so what we'll need now, we'll need to start styling the card itself to have a border around it. So the first thing that we're going to do is make sure that it encompasses everything we're looking for. Okay, so it's on the H-stack. Perfect. So what we're going to do, we're going to first add a padding to kind of space the padding around the card. So we're going to say padding, and we want it to surround all. You don't, by default it is all, and we want it to be a padding of 5. Then we're going to add a background color. So we're going to say background. Instead of setting a color that blue or something, we want it to be clear. So transparent background. Then we would like to add an overlay to give it that border, that rounded border. So what we're going to do, we're going to say overlay. Then we're going to say rounded rectangle, and we're going to use a corner radius of 5. Then we're going to add a stroke to this rounded rectangle. So we're going to say stroke, and we're going to give it a line width of 1. Then we're going to give it a foreground color, and we're going to say color dot secondary, but we don't want it to be as bright. So what we'll do, we'll give it an opacity of 50%, so 0.5. Then we want to add a little shadow. So in adding a shadow, we're going to say, we're going to first give a shadow a color, and we want to use the same opacity as the foreground. So color dot, well, so color dot secondary, the opacity 0.5. Then we're going to put a comma, and we're going to give it a radius, and the radius is going to be of 5, and we're going to give it an x coordinate of 0 and a y coordinate of 5. Perfect. Okay, so now that we have created the today's session, I'm going to go a bit faster for the other sections. So let's look at our reference. So we have created the today's session, so I'll go a little bit faster for the followers because it's essentially the same, just some minor changes. Okay, so let's go back to the grid. So inside of a grid, we're going to need an additional card, and this card will be called store followers report summary card. Okay, so what I'm going to do, in the interest of time, I'm going to copy a lot of what we have done in today's session summary card, since it's very similar. Okay, So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy this section. I'm going to make the changes since it is almost identical. Okay, that's one of the beauties of SwiftUI. Okay, let's get rid of this since we don't need that. Okay, so what we're going to do, or actually I do need this. What we're going to do, we're going to go back inside of the view model and we're going to create an additional view model. So inside here, not additional view model, but additional publisher that we'll be using to add the data. So what we're going to do, we're going to say at published var followers, similar to before, and we're going to use a summary data model. And let's see what parameters we're going to need. We're going to need a summary amount, the title, the subheadline, the subheadline value, as well as percent change, similar to before. So this one. So for the title, we're going to say followers. For the headline, subheadline, we're going to say new followers per day. Then the amount, we're going to say we have an amount of 589. For the subheadline value, we're going to say 20. We're going to say there's a change of 9.5%, which is positive, which means that the value should be positive, and therefore we should, once it reloads, once we add a correct value, it will not be negative. Before I forget, let me change the value of today's revenue to be positive. Not a big deal. Okay, so inside today's session, let's make the changes. So sales, we are looking for followers. So all I need to do is change followers and it will make the necessary changes. Followers, then change the followers dot summary amount, and as you see, the changes are being made. Followers. That's the thing I love about SwiftUI, is that you can build it once and you can make it reusable. Okay, let's see. So we have followers. Okay, 20%. Okay, let's see if there's any tweaks that we need to do. Okay, so let's look back from the top. 0.6. Okay, that is correct. That is correct. No decimal place. Spacing. Subheadline. Okay. The padding 5, clear, color radius. Okay, perfect. So let's look back at our reference. So we have all 4 of the cards at the top. So in the next video, we will be tackling to add the charts. So these 2 charts here, as well as coming up with the midpoint. So join me in the next part of the video series. If you'd like the source code, you can find it in the Patreon link that is in the description and the first comment. You'll have 2 versions. You'll have the part 1, part 2, or if you would like access to the entire source code that is a few videos ahead, you'll also be able to access it via my Patreon. Thanks for your support and see you in the next video. Thank you.